Last year, I started law school in Los Angeles. It was my first time living in a big city, and I was thrilled. For a million people, bright lights, endless things to do, it felt like the kind of place where your life was supposed to start. Ever since I was little, I knew I had a half-sister who lived somewhere in LA. Her name was Hannah. My parents never talked about her much. In fact, the topic always carried this weird tension. My mom's tone would tighten. My dad would change the subject. It was like Hannah was a ghost that floated just outside the family photo frame. Of course, as I got older, I looked her up online. I'd seen a few pictures, knew roughly how she looked, brown hair, kind eyes, a little shy in photos, but we'd never actually met. Then, one night early in my first semester, I got a friend request on Facebook from Hannah. I clicked it right away. The profile looked legit. Same photos I remembered. Friends from California. Nothing that screamed fake. A few minutes later, she messaged me. She said she was so happy to finally find me, that she wanted to meet. She was hosting a little dinner party that weekend at a park in the city. She said her friends were bringing food and music. Told me to come meet everyone. I remember sitting at my tiny apartment desk, staring at the message. It sounded nice, warm even, but something about meeting for the first time at a park at night didn't sit right with me. I mean, this was someone I'd wanted to know my whole life. That kind of meeting deserved coffee or dinner somewhere cozy, not a public park full of strangers. Still, I almost said yes. I was new to LA, still trying to make friends, still figuring out which neighborhoods were safe and which weren't. I imagined all these outcomes, us hugging and crying, or maybe awkward silence, or maybe laughing like we'd known each other forever. But something inside me whispered no. I didn't go. A few weeks later, though, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Maybe I missed my chance. So one afternoon, out of curiosity, I Googled the name of the park where she'd invited me. That's when I realized something was very wrong. I won't name the park, but anyone who's lived in LA long enough knows it's one of the most dangerous spots in the city. The kind of place you don't even drive near after dark. The area is controlled by gangs. Robberies and assaults happen almost nightly. People who do business there have to pay protection money just to exist in the shadows. My stomach twisted as I read. Why would my sister, who I'd never met, want me to meet her there? It didn't make sense. So I decided to try reaching out to her a different way. I had a friend from undergrad named Maya who happened to go to the same college Hannah attended. I asked Maya if she'd try to find her, maybe tell her I was in town, that I wanted to meet, safely. A few days later, Maya texted me. Hey, I found her. She said she'd love to meet you. How about my place? I was so relieved. That weekend, the three of us met at Maya's little off-campus apartment. When Hannah walked in, I recognized her instantly. Same eyes, same soft smile I'd seen online. We clicked right away. Talked for hours about everything. Family, childhood, college. The weird ways life had kept us apart. At one point, I told her about the Facebook invitation, how she'd supposedly invited me to a dinner at that park. Her face went pale. She said she hadn't used Facebook since high school. Her old account had been hacked once, and apparently, people had tried impersonating her before, even scamming some of her friends with fake concert ticket offers. When I showed her the message, she was horrified. That's not me, she said, shaking her head. I would never tell you to meet me there. That park's basically a war zone after dark. The fake account was already deleted by then, wiped clean, like it had never existed. But whoever made it knew too much. They knew Hannah had a half-sister new to LA. They knew roughly when I'd moved. They even knew how to write like her, down to the way she phrased her messages. Someone had been pretending to be her, and they tried to lure me into one of the most dangerous parts of Los Angeles. For what reason? I don't know. Maybe robbery, maybe kidnapping, maybe something worse. I don't ever want to find out. Meeting my real sister that night, the real Hannah, was one of the best things to ever happen to me, but realizing that someone had tried to use her face to pull me into something dark, that still makes my skin crawl. Every so often, I still wonder what would have happened if I'd gone. If I'd shown up to that park, smiling, nervous, waiting, and if whoever sent that message had been waiting too. Waiting for me. It happened back in 1996. I was 15 years old. living in a quiet suburb outside a mid-sized city of about 100,000 people. Every weekday, I took the bus home from school, usually from the stop right by campus. But one afternoon, for some reason, I decided to walk to the main bus station downtown instead. It was a little out of the way, but I felt grown up taking the longer route. The station was busy with people heading home from work, the kind of place that always smelled faintly like diesel and old newspapers. I stood by the gate for bus 15, the one that would take me home. Bus 17 left from the same gate, so I wasn't alone while waiting. After about 10 minutes, a man walked up to me and asked, "Hey, has bus 17 left yet?" I told him yes. It had just gone a few minutes ago. He sighed, said something about bad timing, then smiled and reached out his hand. "Name's Kevin," he said. It felt strange. I was just a teenager, and he looked at least 30, maybe 40, but I didn't want to be rude, so I shook his hand and said, "I'm Sarah." That wasn't my real name, but something about him made me want to lie. He asked if I had just gotten out of school. I nodded. He asked which one, and again I lied. Then he wanted to know where I was headed. I told him I was at a friend's house, even though I was really going home. When my bus finally pulled up, I felt a wave of relief. I climbed aboard quickly and sat near the middle. But then Kevin got on too. That didn't make any sense. He'd said he was waiting for bus 17. The two routes didn't share any stops at all. He paid his fare and walked down the aisle, straight to the seat next to me. I tried to act calm, staring out the window as the bus rattled forward. He leaned closer, smiling like we were old friends. "So," he said, "what year are you in?" I told him I was a junior, even though I was really just a freshman. He chuckled. "You look a little young for that." "I get that a lot," I said, forcing a laugh. Then he asked if I had a boyfriend. I told him no. He smirked and said, "You should. A pretty girl, like you shouldn't be walking around alone." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I asked him where he was headed, pretending to sound casual. "Home," he said simply. I mentioned he'd asked about bus 17 earlier. He smiled again, slower this time, and said, "Changed my mind. I live at the end of this line." That wasn't true. I'd taken this route for years and never seen him before. The longer we rode, the quieter the bus got. By the time we passed my stop, I made a split-second decision. I'd skip it and get off one stop later, hoping to lose him. When the bus hissed to a stop, I stood and stepped off. The night air felt heavy, quiet, strange. Then I heard his shoes hit the pavement behind me. He'd gotten off too. I turned around, pretending to be surprised. "You live here too?" He smiled. "No, I thought I'd walk you home." My stomach dropped. I tried to stay calm. "That's okay. I'm going to friends." Before I could finish, his tone snapped. "Shut up and walk." The words cut through the dark like glass. I froze. There was no one else on the street. The bus had already pulled away. The streetlights flickered. A cold wind brushed my face. He stepped closer, put a hand on my shoulder, firm, heavy. "I don't have much time," he said softly, "so we should get going." I nodded, afraid to anger him. He smiled a little. "If you're good, you don't have to be scared of me." I lied and said, "I'm not scared." "Good," he said. "Then say it." My voice trembled as I repeated, "Yes, I'll be good." He guided me forward, hands still gripping my shoulder as we walked down an empty street. I didn't know where I was going, just moving, praying silently with every step that someone would appear. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Then, up ahead, I saw an older man kneeling by his front garden, trimming hedges near his fence. That was all I remember clearly. I must have bolted toward him, screaming, because the next thing I knew, police lights were flashing and my parents were at the station. Kevin had run off before the man could grab him. The police took my statement, but said there wasn't much they could do. I didn't know his last name. There were no cameras back then. My parents bought me a cell phone that same day, a luxury in the 90s, just so they could always reach me. From then on, I only ever took the bus right in front of my school. Weeks passed. I tried to move on. Then one morning, as I stepped onto the bus, my heart nearly stopped. He was sitting there, in the back row, smiling that same awful grin. Our eyes met. I turned and ran right back off the bus. Tears blurred my vision as I sprinted into the school. My mom came to get me. The school notified police, but again, nothing could be done. For months afterward, he was spotted near campus, lingering by the sidewalks, standing across the street, always watching, sometimes for days in a row, sometimes disappearing for weeks. He never came close again, never spoke to me, but knowing he was there ruined my sense of safety. I spent the rest of that year waiting inside the school until my mom finished work and could drive me home. She always took different routes, making sure we weren't followed. Eventually, he vanished. Years passed. When I was 21, home for summer break from university, I saw him one last time, in a grocery store across town. He didn't even look at me, didn't seem to recognize me at all, but I recognized him immediately. That same blank expression, that same slow, deliberate walk. There's no offender registry where I live, no database to check who he was or what he'd done. I never learned his last name, never knew his story. Maybe he was just a mentally unstable man who fixated on me. Or maybe it was something much darker. My mother believes he had a plan, that he knew exactly where I was headed that day. My father still refuses to talk about it. And me, I'm just grateful. Grateful that I saw that gardener. Grateful that I ran. Because I truly believe, if I hadn't, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. This is a story my dad told me, one that's haunted him his entire life. He grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Springfield, Ohio. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where kids rode bikes until sunset and the sound of lawnmowers filled the evenings. Across the street lived a boy named Ryan Wade. He was around my dad's age, maybe a year older, a lanky redheaded kid with a face full of freckles and a bad attitude to match. My dad said even as children, Ryan always had something off about him. He'd spit at people walking by, throw rocks at windows, and once even set fire to a neighbor's shed, then blamed it on a boy with special needs who lived a few houses down. Everyone in the neighborhood knew he was trouble, but no one could have predicted how far that darkness would go. When my dad was 19, a sophomore in college, he heard the news that still chills him to this day. Ryan and two of his friends, Clint Harper and Ken Dorsey, had been hanging out one night near the old highway bridge outside town. They'd been drinking, throwing chunks of concrete off the overpass at cars passing below. One of those chunks smashed through the windshield of a small sedan carrying two young women, Wendy O'Hara, 21, and her friend Donna McCree, 20. Both girls were sisters who'd just finished a late shift at a local diner. Their car swerved off the road and rolled to a stop near the ditch. Ken panicked and ran home, but Ryan and Clint stayed behind. That's when their night took a horrific turn. They walked down to the wreck, pretending to help, told the girls they'd give them a ride somewhere safe. The girls, shaken, bleeding, terrified, trusted them. They had no way of knowing they were climbing into the car of monsters. Ryan and Clint drove them to a deserted field behind the old Maplewood Mall, a place locals called the Flats. It was quiet there, isolated. They told the girls to call their parents and say they were fine. But once the calls were made, everything changed. They tied their hands with rope and dragged them deeper into the field. What followed was nearly 3 hours of unspeakable torture, assault, stabbing, and violence too cruel to imagine. Before leaving, Ryan carved large X's into both of their stomachs, a mark he later bragged about to his friends. They left the bodies in the field like garbage and drove home laughing. The next day, Ryan tried to sell the girls jewelry and clothes for cash. When no one would buy them, he tossed everything into a burn barrel behind his parents' house. The fire woke my dad's parents across the street. My grandfather, who'd dealt with Ryan's antics before, called the police to report another disturbance from that Wade boy. When officers arrived, they noticed the items in the fire, bits of fabric, metal jewelry, and something that looked suspiciously like blood. They collected what they could and began to piece things together. Within hours, investigators found the girls' abandoned car on the side of the interstate. By the next morning, Ryan Wade and Clint Harper were both arrested. Clint had a bloody pocket knife in his jacket, the same knife used to stab Wendy in the neck. Some of the burned items still carried traces of DNA. The story hit the local papers like a storm. My dad remembers reading the headline in disbelief. 2 local teens arrested in double homicide. Clint was only 17 at the time, so he avoided the death penalty. sentenced instead to life in prison. Ryan, however, was 19, and the jury showed no mercy. He was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death by lethal injection. My dad said the entire neighborhood fell silent when they heard the verdict. It was surreal, but the strange kid who once lived across the street had become a killer. Years later, on October 14, 2003, at 10 a.m., Ryan Wade was executed at the state penitentiary. Wendy's family attended the execution. They watched through the glass as he finally met justice. My dad said he'll never forget that day. Even though he wasn't there, he remembers exactly where he was when the news broke on TV. He looked out his parents' living room window across the street. At that same old house where Ryan once lived, the yard was overgrown, the porch rotting, the windows boarded up. Every time I visit my grandparents, I catch myself looking at that house too. It's just an empty building now, quiet, ordinary. But when you know what happened, when you know who lived there, it's impossible not to feel a chill crawl up your spine. My dad always said he was lucky. Lucky he never befriended that boy. Lucky he never got pulled into his orbit. Because sometimes evil doesn't look like a monster. Sometimes it's just the kid across the street.